Good morning. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. So let's ask the question, what does it mean when we say steps to financial success? What is this workshop really about? Let me back up and say, I'm Lindy Fuller with Summit Credit Union. I'm here today because financial fitness, financial success is very important to me. I'm passionate about helping people understand their situation and how to help them with financial wellness, because we all want to be successful financially. That said, the focus today is going to be to help you get there, no matter what situation you're in, no matter what your credit, none of that stuff matters. It's where you end up that we're looking to be the goal, not necessarily where you start. So wherever you are, we're going to help you out. I think you're going to be able to at least get a couple of points to start putting into practice right away. So let's begin. When we think of a step to financial success, you might think of budgeting. I'm not crazy about that term. Sounds a little boring. Sounds like you've got to give something up. Well, instead of a budget, I would like to call it something else. Would you call it a spending plan, money management? What about a financial success plan? I think that sounds something better. There's something in it for us if we call it that, right? Whatever you call it, though, it's really nothing more than having a plan to tell your money where to go instead of trying to find out where it went. We've all had that experience, right? Where it's about the third week of the month and you wonder, where did it all go? If you're just spending without direction and hoping you have something left at the end of the month, you know it almost never happens that way. This might be a new concept for some of you. I hope not, because we don't want to spend more than we make. So I'm going to help you take steps to get on that financially successful path. It starts with commitment. It is the most important step. Now you're going to want to remember that because we're going to have a poll asking about the various steps. So commitment's number one. What you need is family buy-in. Everyone must be willing to participate, especially if you share your money. That is with a partner, could even be with a child, young or old. One person can't make a budget work in a family where there are more than 2 or 3 spenders, right? You've got to have buy-in. You can overcome a reluctant partner or family member by giving them an allowance or taking away debt or credit cards. Now that might not be easy, easier said than done, as they say, but you have to do that. You have to make sure everyone's on the same page, even if it means taking something away temporarily. Which brings us to number 2, which would be to set goals. There has to be a reward for building a financial success plan. Speaking to what's in it for me. Whether it's saving money to go to Disney, to buy a home, to buy a car, maybe even go back to school or just get out of debt. Whatever your goal, pick something that is important to you. You have to set a goal in order to reach your plan. Your ultimate plan depends on that. The plan works best when there's an incentive. Now, SMART goals are important because those are the ones that we meet. They're specific. They always have a buy-win. And if you put your goals in writing, or my personal favorite, put them on a picture board or a vision board, you can be sure that you'll meet them because they'll be in front of you. So SMART goals are the ones that work. Here are some good examples of SMART goals. Now, why? These are specific, measurable, adjustable, realistic, and they have that time element. When you look at this one, perhaps one in particular stands out to you. Having a $10,000 down payment by September of next year. That sounds like you're looking to buy a house. That could be you. This is a really good market for that. But is that reasonable? Can you have $10,000 by September next year saved up? Maybe. But if not, that's where you have that adjustable element to work for you. Can you think of any others that might be a good example for you personally? Now, if you do have some and you want to mention them in the chat, please feel free to share. I'll check that real quick. Or Liz, if you would like to mention any if they pop up. Goals for retirement. Having a nest egg of 6,000 by, yes, that time element. Having an emergency fund. Excellent. You guys are speaking my language. Thank you. Okay, so we are going to address a bunch of these things, and then you can put them into practice with step 3. So let's look at step 4. This is what we call the easiest step, and that is because we really know where our money's coming from already. It's actually easy because we either have a digital or a paper pay stub, right? So that we can, I like that, be debt-free. I see you. But we can actually see where our money's coming from because we have specific sources of income, typically on a regular basis, whether they're full-time or part-time employment or disability or SSI. We know exactly what to expect, right? And there might be some variance in it, but not by much. Which income do we use though? Do we use the big number, the gross, or do we use a different number? What do you think? Net, yes. Now, why would we use net? Everyone is answering correctly. We don't want to use gross because that's the money that's not really hitting our account, is it? That's the pre-taxed, pre-everything. Everything gets taken out of gross and then it hits our account. So we want that real money, the real dollars that are hitting our account to work with in our plan here, our financial success plan. So we don't want to include things that might just be 1 year, like tax refunds or insurance rebates, even gifts. You might be in a situation where you get an annual bonus. If it's a guaranteed bonus, use it. If it's not guaranteed, don't use it. You don't want to base your whole setup or your whole financial success plan on money that's not realistically going to be there. Does that make sense? So the idea here is choose a tracking method that works. If you're not tracking every expense, then you're really setting yourself up for failure in the department of budgeting or making this plan work. You've got to track. So do you start from scratch? Close that. You may not have to start from scratch if you're already tracking, but if you haven't been tracking, which one of you said they weren't, then you do need to start from scratch, which basically means you've got to do the hard stuff. And ultimately, you need at least 3 or 4 months worth of tracking. because you've got to figure out where you've been spending your money. And none of us think that we're spending as much as we really are on specific things. So if I asked you, how much do you spend on going out to eat each week or each month? You might give me a figure right off the top of your head, but once you go back and look at your statements or look at your online register, or keep those receipts for a month or two, you will see you're spending a whole lot more than you thought. I guarantee it. So what this tracking does is it makes us face reality. That is certainly, you spend too much on internet and TV services. I'm probably right there with you, I'm afraid. Ultimately, though, what we do want to avoid is missing something. So when we track it all, that includes your cash withdrawals. Now, when you say that, cash withdrawals, you're still spending that money on something. So that's where you might keep your receipts. If you're a cash person, make sure that during that 3 or 4 months tracking period that you keep your receipts so you really know specifically what category to put specific spending in. Okay, so that was the hardest step. After those few months of tracking, what you'll be able to see is that you've got a pretty good concept of where your money's going now. You have to do that again for 3 or 4 months. Why do you think that is? I can tell you that 3 or 4 months typically, yes, presents a pattern. And what you'll find is that there are various patterns in different quarters. So for instance, your summer quarter might look a little bit different from your holiday quarter, we'll put it that way. So your summertime spending might be a little different, especially if you have children. That grocery bill probably will go up, right? Versus those other months. And then you've got a lot of spending potentially in the last quarter with the holidays. So keeping that in mind, you will want to continue to track to a degree based on where you started. And there's nothing wrong if you've got the data to go back a whole year to get a really good idea of what your average is. Okay, and this, of course, in your tracking is where you want to recommit with your family, because ultimately, being that this is the hardest step, you're going to want to remind them, remember, we're doing this for Disney. Remember, we're doing this to get the house by this time next year. We can do it. And that will help all of you with your buy-in and keeping on track with your goals. Okay, so what in the world are we going to do with the various types of expenses? Tracking all of these can be a little crazy. Some come every week and vary each time, while others always are the same each month. Then, of course, you've got those annual expenses or maybe quarterly. How do you budget for those? Well, you don't pull your hair out. Tracking those might be, I like that, create a cushion. Yeah. Tracking expenses is very important and ultimately the hardest part of developing your spending plan. But variable spending is challenging because those expenses can change drastically. So if you've got an annual bill, let's say your home tax bill, and you don't escrow, that means when the bill comes, you've got to take care of that yourself. That particular bill is something you don't want to wait to the last minute to up and come up with that large number, right? You want to prepare for that and start putting money back for the whole year. Or, as one of you suggested, build enough cushion that you'll be able to pay it when it comes without earmarking it specifically. You can do it both ways, but just don't want to be in a situation where you can't pay it, right, when it comes due. And some examples might be clothing, groceries, dining out, medical costs, things like that that might happen fairly regularly that really can go up or down drastically. Recreation, fast food. You know what your guilty pleasures are. You know if you tend to be an ATM visitor, and then when it's gone, it's gone. And if you don't budget that properly, even with your cash, you might miss out on some things you really wanted to do. So getting tough with yourself can be hard, but the variables, managing those expenses can work. You can do it. Looking at this list, can you account for how much of your cash went to some of these items just in the last month? Do we have any regular Starbucks people? Yeah, sometimes we're on it. We know exactly what we do because we're people of habit. Have to keep going to the grocery store. Yeah. So for me, I'm someone that has tracked for a long time and had to adjust on occasion because that's what we like to do. Oh, we've got a cigar person. We're going to talk about you in a minute. But going to the grocery store, I find that unless it's a month that I plan to do a lot of entertaining, what I will do is basically average about $90 a month, $90 a week in groceries for my family. Now we've just got the three of us, and we typically have our specific eat out patterns, but that I know is an average for me. So you guys are giving me a lot of good feedback. Doctor visits, gas, and groceries. Yeah. When we think about how much of that is variable, yeah, and especially gas, nowadays it's so easily fluctuating from one week to the next. It's hard to say. But when we see how much these things fluctuate, it really helps us appreciate why it's important to stay on track. So once we do track for, let's say, a month or more, what we want to do is notice that there's certain categories of expenses, both for recurring bills and spending receipts. So we want to put these into categories. This is where you want to start recording your findings. Whether paper or electronic spreadsheets are used, you want to list the recurring monthly expenses. This is relatively easy because they recur. You know what those are. Put those at the top. Also, your loan payments, like your insurance, rent, mortgage, utilities. Then you want to include your quarterly or annual expenses, property tax, water, insurance, things like that. And just divide by the appropriate months. If it's an annual expense, divide by 12. If it's a quarterly, divide by 4. Does that make sense? Super important that you get your average and then create a cushion. Now, this particular person did not leave much of a cushion for themselves, and they had a really rough February. Look at their Netflix and entertainment. It's interesting, isn't it? But this particular person has a lot of credit cards too. So they need to attend this class. The idea is definitely to stay out of the red, but certainly keeping your average above and hopefully with some cushion because we know life happens, right? Okay, on to step 8. This is where we compare and we might shock ourselves. We're comparing our receipts, our spending versus our income. We're like, oh my word, what have I done? I had no idea I was spending that much money on these things. You can still reach your financial goal though. You just have to commit to your plan and you'll get there faster. So what are the results of your comparison? At this point, spending less or more than you make. If it's more, then you really need a spending plan because that means you're going into unnecessary debt. And none of us wants that. Once you have tracked your spending for 3 or more months, you can determine where to cut your spending. And yes, you can cut them. Just to give you an example, you can save $3 to $4 each day just by taking your lunch rather than going out. That's about $90 a month. If you're a vending machine person, 2 trips a day to the vending machine, that's about $50 a month. And for you Starbucks folks, do you really need to spend $5 on a cup of coffee? Well, maybe, if that's what you love. Some people go 2 or 3 times a day though. And 3 times a day is $450 a month. Sometimes we do these things without thinking about the financial effect it's having. So, what are some economical alternatives? Can you think of any? I've given you a visual hint here. Rather than going out, we can certainly brown bag it, as they say, or just bring your lunch from home. Buy a Keurig. Yes. Yes, definitely cost effective. What I love too is the idea of not necessarily having to stop any particular guilty pleasure. You might just cut back. So if you're the person that loves going out, maybe just not every day, right? Cut it back so that you can afford to do what you really want to do. Some people prefer ice cream over coffee. If you bring your container of ice cream to my work, you might not have all your ice cream for later. Somebody was saying they bring a big carton of it. That's great if that works for you. Not sure it would work for all of us, but that is an alternative. So good job. Change is uncomfortable at best. So cutting our spending may be a little painful, but it doesn't have to stay that way. Communicating with those who you share money with, probably you share a home with them, but not necessarily. Everyone has to be on the same page. So these are just some ideas of what you might say, how you might word it. For example, with all 3 of us committing to packing a lunch on Mondays and Wednesdays, we'll save at least $50 a week that will go into the vacation fund. Can we do that? I think we can. Saying something like that creates some buy-in. It's we, not you. And it calls to mind what that incentive is again, right? We're talking vacation. We're talking something everybody wants. And we're not saying every day, we're saying Mondays and Wednesdays. So think about that when you have to word it to someone who may not really be loving the cutting of the spending. So when we think about whether it's worth it or not, I can assure you it is. How do we know? The example here shows that the average lunch cost is between $4 and $15. averaging $10 a day. That all depends on where you eat for lunch, right? This particular blog goes on to say that brown bagging it is between $2 and $6 a day. So going with an average brown bag cost of $4 a day, that's a 60% savings over eating out. If you save $6 a day, 5 days a week, that's $30 a week, $120 a month, and almost $1,500 a year. That's just switching to brown bagging it. Now, that may not be the most reasonable option for you, but I will share at this point that our financial advisor here in Greensboro brown bags it every day. He is a millionaire, guys, but he brown bags it. So it's not about whether you have the money, it's whether you choose to spend it that way or not. Realistically, start packing your lunch once a week. That's $6 every week. Average savings, that's $312 per person in your house that chooses to do that. For a family of 3 like mine, that's $936 a year. So when you think about those numbers, it is gradual savings, but it's realistic and it really has big dividends. We all want to see that cushion build. This is one way we can do it. And all of us can do it, no matter what we make. Okay, so now we're going to put some of these numbers in front of you. These are some of the average costs of some expenses that are very common. We talked about the others, but I'm going to mention Save Your Change. Save Your Change is an interesting way to start saving. Who of us would not appreciate an extra $300 a year? Or who of us is maybe a little jilted because they haven't gotten the raise that they feel they deserve? Looking at all of these are ways that we can give ourselves a raise by better managing our own money. Save Your Change is a good way for kids to start learning how to save. But the way that we do it in my house is we keep a jar in the house to collect the change. And typically my husband, he's the cash guy. I'm not the cash person. He uses cash and then he puts his change every time in the jar. Actually, it's in a cup, in one of his cup holders. And every time that gets full, that's his mad money. That's his money to go do what he wants to do with. And it adds up quick. Throw it in the coin machine here at Summit Credit Union. You'd be surprised how much it adds up. So let's look for a second at that 1 pack a day smoker. Now we saw we had a cigar smoker. I don't know if that means cigarettes too on occasion, but just statistically, in 2018, the average cost of 1 pack of cigarettes was $5.51. That's over $2,011 a year. If that's your guilty pleasure, but you don't want to cut it off, you don't want to be as healthy as you could be, you can still cut back to half and you're still saving over $1,000 a year. Do you have a $1,000 bill that you would like to pay? If so, now you see how you can do it. Okay, so we won't step on any more toes. That was just for fun anyway, but you can see the point of how much little things add up to big savings. On to step 10. This is where we allocate funds to your most important expense, your savings. Now, why would that be the most important expense? Because you want to pay yourself first. You put money into savings, and hopefully you can do that with direct deposit or automatic transfer, because then you don't have the pain of having the money being taken away. It's already gone before you get it, right, in your account, and then it's moved automatically. So when you save, what's left over is for the other bills. But if you do it backwards, there's not going to be anything left for when there's an emergency, for when you need to retire, or for that spending plan, hopefully vacation yield that you're looking for. And you all know life happens. So we have to budget, right? Or plan successfully for the unexpected. We've all probably been there, either had to replace a college student's laptop, a flat tire, there's been sickness, who knows? But if we're not prepared for these three things, then we're definitely going to fail financially. Does anyone here know how much money we're encouraged to have in our emergency fund? $6 months, 3 months, 6 months, 3 months. I'm seeing a lot of 3 and 6 months. You're actually all right. It's from 3 to 6 months at a minimum. So if you say more, you're not wrong, because you want to start somewhere. If you don't have an emergency fund, you want your goal to be that 3 months. And when I say 3 months, what do I mean? You want 3 months worth of your net. Because that's what you pay bills with. Now, if you can have more, great, but that's where to start. Once you get to 3, then change your goal to 6. And they say that at least 6 months is where we need to be on the minimum. If your plan allows for it, then of course make it more. But the reality is, and someone is mentioning COVID shows that we need to plan for more than 6 months. Yes, the unexpected sometimes is more devastating than we ever imagined. That's why we don't just need one. We need opportunity fund and retirement fund as well. So if you have a retirement fund and it's being matched, my recommendation would be to match as much as they will match, or I should deposit or have that withdrawn for at the highest percentage, if you can afford it, that Guilford County would match. You don't want to turn away free money, as they say. Now, what can I mean by an opportunity fund? An opportunity fund is something like a vacation, is something like a annual girls' weekend. I mean, you name it. It could be anything that you want to do that is not a have to, but you'll never do it unless you save for it. So you can do this several different ways. You could have an opportunity fund, yes, that's specifically for your kids, for stuff that happens for your kids, maybe outside of college savings, or it could start with college savings and then be something else. But you want to have those kind of things available. Some people here have a Christmas club savings, and some use it for Christmas gifts. Others use it for the annual girls' weekend. I say that because I know of a member who frequently calls me to have that adjusted, always increasing the amount that she wants to have deducted so that grows. So really cool ideas. Think about paying yourself first by funding your savings as part of your expenses. Okay. And don't forget those three categories. Hopefully your retirement plan is worked out in that section between gross and net, so you don't have to supplement that with your net, but that's always an option too. But definitely the emergency fund, okay? So moving on to step 11, develop your spending plan and set your spending limits. Now, once you've determined that your income is set, you've tracked your expenses for 4 months, you've determined where you can cut expenses, then you can start to allocate and set dollar amounts for these variable things. Like I mentioned, the groceries earlier. Mine's $90 a week. So I average that out. And I know that when I do my grocery shopping online, it has that little number at the top so that I can keep track of my total. I know that unless I'm planning to entertain, that should be 90 or less. It's a visual for me when I take care of the groceries each week, and I know where I'm at. I stay on budget that way without having to be in that fine-tuned tracking mode. But that's where you want to be here. We're setting the spending limits. We understand where we're at. We know we don't want to spend more than a certain amount on entertainment, on medical, etc. And finally, we want to be able to reallocate, because again, we've got to make this adjustable. We want to stay on the path to financial fitness. We want to continue to track our spending, but maybe not every single penny like we did in the beginning. Now, some people get joy from that. If you do, go for it. You'll only be more wealthy for doing that. Latrice, I hear you. If you track it though, then you're in control. And for those of you that are, wanting to control your money and be in charge of it, I applaud you. Nobody else should care about your money more than you. So after the first quarter of working your plan, you're going to find that some of the spending estimates that you made with your spending plan just aren't working. They don't make sense. You might have allocated a much larger number than you need, or maybe not enough. So this is where you can make those adjustments and then make sure you're still staying within your income limits. Okay, so let's see it all together. 12 steps. Now that is sort of meant to be funny. 12 steps to financial success. What we want to do at this point is give you a little poll, track what you learned. So let's go to the next one. And it's 3 questions. Which of the steps is most important? Which step is easiest? And which step is the hardest? Go ahead in the poll and answer those questions for me. Okay, I'm going to end it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and to share the results with you. Now, only you know what exactly that you said. I want to make sure you can see the whole thing here. There we go. But as far as which step was the most important, yes, that was definitely number 1, commitment. You won't do it if you're not committed. Therefore, you won't be successful unless you've got the commitment. The easiest step, yes, was number 4. You've got your stubs or your electronic income statement, so you know what you make. That's the easiest. And then which is the hardest? Wow, we had a little mixed feel for this one. The correct answer was actually 6, tracking. 11 is difficult, but it's not as hard as you think when you've really got a handle on your incentive. You know what you want to do. You know there's something in it for you. Tracking is hard, specifically if you're starting from scratch too, watching every penny. This is me. This is my number, my email, and hopefully I will hear from you. I would love to get your feedback, and it will absolutely work with teenagers. Yes. You've just got to work the plan, and having this visual will help. Does anyone here use a vision board? I think it's a really good plan for the end of the year, like the last week or so of the year, to put together a vision board for the next year. But if you're highly visual, yeah, I actually use Pinterest to bring some of those ideas together to create a vision board. Me and my daughter have done that. But you can do them now. It doesn't have to have a year attached. Please give me your feedback. Let me know what you think. I'm excited for what we're doing with Guilford County.